Welcome back to the Sports Fix live across the Sports Fix Radio Network. J-Rock back with you, rolling on here. Still got a ton of we just got going on this thing. My man Jon McMullen from the Sports Network's getting ready to jump in on the conversation. We were talking about the Browns and the story and the latest swirling around. Always something. Just when you hoped it was. And you know what? I jinxed it. On Monday. Screwed up. Yeah, go ahead and give me the heat for this, but I'll give it to myself. On Monday, when I was saying we were talking about other coaches and teams searching, and well, at least we got one thing we don't have to worry about right now, even if we may have to worry about a bunch of other things. No, well, anyways, my fault, man. That's why we don't mock Nick Swisher on the show. Same reason we shouldn't tempt fate in other ways as well. But we're going to pick up that conversation with Jon McMullen. Dan Wismar still to come in a little bit. Got a lot of talk. Football talk. Browns, Buckeyes, some Cavaliers. They're back in action tonight. We'll reopen the phones and more. You can't get through on the phones right now, but you can hit us up on social media. Facebook.com/thesportsfix. Tweet with us at the Sports Fix CLE, and you can always leave a message on the hotline, 216-539-7535. Facebook.com/thesportsfix. Tweet with us at the Sports Fix CLE. Going to the phones now. Jon McMullen from the Sports Network with us. Of course, no slowdown in your day. We've hit the playoff season now, and of course, no slowdown in Cleveland either. We've obviously hit the silly season here. How are you doing, my man? Happy New Year, by the way. Happy holidays and all of that.
Hey, Jerry. Happy New Year.
Yeah, absolutely. How were your holidays before we get into all the business shop talk? Christmas, New Year, all of that. Have a good time for you?
It's always busy, and when you cover the NFL, you don't get to enjoy the holidays as much as other people because you're always working.
Oh, absolutely, and business continues to pick up. Whether teams are playing or not, we'll get into talking about some divisional round action. A lot of good games coming up here. But, before we went to the break, we'll just jump right back into it. We were talking about the latest. It merged this week from – it morphed. It was just a guy looking to advance his career. Hey, maybe Kyle Shanahan's looking for a job somewhere else. And I don't know if you've seen Pro Football Talk, Mary Kay Cabot and the Cleveland.com story, but now the story's coming out that Kyle Shanahan – and again, I started the show saying, remember, there's always three sides to everything as far as some of the dysfunction, once again, that word being thrown around about the front office and its interaction with the play calling and the coaching staff for the Cleveland Browns. Have you read that story, and what are your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, I've seen them, and it doesn't surprise me. Obviously, when you have an organization that hasn't been very consistent from the top down, you tend to have these power vacuums, and it only becomes worse when you have, a group of high-profile players that doing some things off the field that nobody likes. You would think that could unite everyone, but it tends to tear them apart. So it doesn't surprise me, and we talked about it dating back to last season and the constant changeover, and that's what this type of thing breeds. And I think Jimmy Haslam has to understand that, and he has to put his foot down, stop it. Make decisions and put people in positions where he trusts them, and the only thing that's going to solve this is long-term continuity. And obviously there's going to be hiccups to get to that, but you can't have these constant changes, and he's got to get people he trusts and he likes, and he's got to stick with them.
Absolutely. No, the two main aspects to this, the one side of it was the divide, and this was an obvious function of itself. We talked about it. Anybody knew it was coming before the season once you drafted the first-round quarterback, whatever his name would have ended up being. But, one part of this was about the pressure from people not in the coaching staff for the switch of the quarterback to happen sooner than it did, and how the coaching staff, for the most part, was in agreement on the way things had played out and how the pressure continued to build. We all saw that. I mean, you could feel it from outside. You could see everything building the way it did.
I'm not in Cleveland. We constantly talked about it. It was obvious that he wasn't ready to play, and talking about Johnny Manziel, and it's pretty clear. Long-time football coaches understand that better than anyone. So
absolutely.
But we constantly point to the fact that if you draft a guy in the first round as personnel people, you have skin in the game, so to speak, and it's desirous for you. That's putting it lightly. It's desirous for you to have that player succeed, and that's what you have. It does, that kind of thing happens all the time, all over the NFL. It just got exacerbated in Cleveland this year because, for whatever reason, Johnny Manziel has that. We've talked about it before. Has that immense star power. So, if you look at the other first-round quarterbacks, Blake Bortles, Teddy Bridgewater, it's the same pressure in those cities, but not to that degree, because for whatever reason, people don't follow every waking moment of those players. And then you couple it with the fact that Manziel just didn't do his job, and it's made things so much worse for the organization as a whole. It's tough. It's tough. It really is.
Oh, absolutely. The other side of that, and that's what I wanted to ask you, because you've got you talk to people, got a lot of connections, is I have nothing. I told people right off the bat, the second aspect of the story was as far as even suggesting that a personnel guy was texting, play calling questions or suggestions during a game into Shanahan in the coaching booth. I don't know if you've heard if there's any truth to that whatsoever, because that's one where I go, okay, now that could, I don't discount it, knowing all the things that have happened in Cleveland before, but at the same time, when a guy's play calling at times has been questioned, perhaps that is a preemptive measure being released. Everything's put out in the media for a reason, but I do know that the first part of the story is 100% legit because we all knew it was going on, but I'm curious if you've heard anything to that side, because I would think no coach anywhere would want to be in an environment where they could be getting influenced during their job in how they should be doing their job.
Yeah, well, that's true. That part of it's true. No coach wants that. Now, the difference is that there are some coaches that have power and some coaches who don't. We talked about it. Mike Pettine doesn't have a lot of power.
Right.
If somebody texted Bill Belichick, he'd probably be fired the next day. It's the interesting thing about the NFL, and we're going through it here in Philadelphia with Chip Kelly, is there's levels of powers, and people look at titles and they assume things. And, head coach isn't the same in Cleveland as it is in New England. A general manager isn't the same. Some general managers have all-encompassing powers. Some general managers have power in name only, don't really have it. So it all depends on the power structure of the actual front office and who's in control. And Mike Pettine isn't in control in Cleveland as far as football matters go. And so, I believe that people texted him, whether you want to say orders or more likely trying to steer him in in one particular direction with, notes, so to speak, if we call it, a Hollywood script writer. Somebody always, coming in and giving other people notes, and they roll their eyes. Yeah, I could see that happening, and I do believe it happened. We've talked about it since. I think Mike Pettine did a good job as the head coach of the Cleveland Browns.
Absolutely,
but he was not a high-profile candidate. He was not in demand in other places. So it's not a guy who walked in there. He got a chance, an unlikely chance, to be one of 32 guys in the world being the coach of an NFL football team. But there's a vast difference, as I said, between the power of a Bill Belichick and the power of a Mike Pettine.
Oh, for sure. I mentioned earlier before in the previous segment that that's the one thing that worries me. I'm used to this kind of monkeying around with the front office and the various things like that. It happens in Cleveland, but I'm afraid that this time, most of these other coaches we've had are just another guy, some guy in the spot holding the jersey until the next guy takes it, just like the quarterbacks. But I actually believe Mike Pettine has the base of a great coach. He's got to grow into it. He's got to go through his cutting his teeth and all that, but I think he could be a very good coach in the NFL, and I'm afraid that he perhaps gets run over. And, when you're always starting over, the vicious circle. But, going back to Shanahan real quick and then seeing this, even no matter what parts of this are true or not, the fact that these things are openly being reported in the media, talked about, that they're out there, it leads me to believe that you, in one way or another, have a guy who is not happy anymore in being here and wants to go elsewhere. I can't see a scenario where Kyle Shanahan is the offensive coordinator for the Browns next season. Can you?
No, I agree with you 100%. It doesn't take a Sherlock Holmes type sleuth to figure out where that leak came from. Everything in the NFL comes from one side or the other, and it's either an agent leaking something for a player or a coach, and it's a front office exec leaking something. Whether it's disparaging to a player or coach, it's pretty clear where this came from. It's pretty clear he's not happy, and I think it's pretty clear he'll be moving on at some point, whether his father gets... I don't think he's going to be a head coach in this league. I think there's an outside chance that Mike Shanahan gets a job, and you can see a reuniting there, although there are reports in Washington that say he wanted to get out of the shadow of him. So there's all kinds of things in play, but I think the one thing that's pretty clear is he certainly doesn't want to be back in Cleveland.
I find those stories crazy. One say one thing and one say the other. Because, you got the Washington, Times. They say, he wanted to be away from his dad and do his own thing. Or does he, now the story is he wants to win with his dad and finish what they started together. And you wonder which is which.
Well, family, I can tell you, I do not blame him if he wants to get away from his father. I'll just say that.
Oh, man. And I'll tell you, like I said, I cursed this whole thing by saying, here we go with some stability, at least in the coaching staff, because at least one major position will probably need to be filled. And I know it's preemptive because we still have Kyle Shanahan for now, but already hearing names bandied out, I heard Charlie Weiss's name speculated about as perhaps somebody that the Browns would be interested in sliding in there. Have you heard that or any other possibilities that have been bandied about?
No, it hasn't gotten that far yet, obviously, because there's such a schism in the front office to begin with, and the fact you have to see how it lines up and where he ends up. As I said, you can't really look for a coordinator, at least, above board. You can do things behind the scenes.
Well, the Jets can. Weren't they texting, they were texting people, Rex is still the coach. I think at one point they texted Rex on accident, said, hey, do you want to coach the Jets? Oops, never mind. Sorry, wrong guy, But,
well, the Jets are the Jets. You never want to follow what the Jets do.
I know. It
might be the one organization Cleveland can look at and say, hey, I'm glad we're not the Jets.
But,
I think, and it's interesting because you bring up bad organizations, and Washington would be another one, and it all starts. It starts with Daniel Snyder. It starts with Woody Johnson, and there in Cleveland, it starts with Jimmy Haslam. He's the one who can't let this go on. He's the one who's got to put his foot down and say, look, let the coaches coach. Personnel guys, you do your job. Leave them alone. And those are the strongest organizations in football, the ones that have clearly defined roles for people in the front office, and the ones that don't, it's not, here in Philadelphia, we just had the latest power shift with Chip Kelly and Howie Roseman, And if you look at the litany of personnel people that have been through the Philadelphia Eagles over the years, losing in power struggles to various people, it's a who's who of this league, and it points, but the same thing, my point is the same thing keeps happening again and again and again and again. Same thing happens in Cleveland. These things keep cropping up again and again and again, and this is where the owner has to step in. And it hasn't happened here. It hasn't